What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love hip hop like I do. So the next versus battle is going to take place between Fat Joe and Ja Rule. And I actually think that this is the perfect opportunity for career redemption, essentially, for Ja Rule, who basically went from one of the hottest rappers in the game for like a span of about 5 years. It's not like the guy was a flash in the pan. He held it down for several albums, and he went from one of the hottest rap artists in the game to basically a hip-hop punchline in the worst way. Like, I can't think of too many rappers who suffered career-wise largely from being on the wrong end or the wrong side of a rap battle. Like Everlast, got dissed heavily by Eminem, but Everlast had already kind of changed from rap, House of Pain background, to his bluesy style of music, so it didn't really affect him too much career-wise. Meek Mill looked like he was about to be done for after Drake dropped Charged Up and Back to Back, but Meek Mill has largely recovered, kind of, right? Cannabis notoriously took a huge hit in his mainstream rap aspirations after battling with LL, as did Kool Moe Dee battling LL. But it's usually a case of like, Jay-Z and Nas, where both guys manage to survive the battle and they go on to, continue their careers. But Ja Rule, because of the battle with 50 Cent and then with Eminem and the feds basically raiding and taking down Ja Rule's label, Murder Inc., basically saw Ja Rule's career suffer to where he never recovered. Like from 99 to 2004, he was on top or near top if we're talking 2002 to 2004, because 50 Cent already started doing a number on him by the time he dropped Get Rich or Die Trying, and that came after the several mixtapes where 50 Cent, Lloyd Banks, and Yayo were just annihilating Ja Rule and Murder Inc. over the course of several songs. It was pretty ruthless, and it's not like Ja and Black Child and Cadillac Ty weren't battling back. Ja Rule and his team had a lot to say, but there were a lot of political matters and so forth that helped to destroy not only Ja Rule, but the Murder Inc. label. And we're going to get into some of that. But right now, I just want to say that I think that this versus battle is a huge opportunity for some redemption, long overdue redemption for Ja Rule, Jeffrey Atkins, who, he came into the game after like the mid-90s. He had his own crew called like Cash Money Click. Not Cash Money Records or CMB, but Cash Money Click. This was mid-90s. And then, they were signed to TVT. They went under because one of the group's members, Chris Black, went to jail for a few years. So the group eventually disbanded. Then Ja Rule, was working with DJ Irv at the time, turned into Irv Gotti later on, who basically founded Murder Inc. with his brother, and it was a lot of his brother's associations that, got Murder Inc. on the Fed's radar, looking into money laundering and all kinds of different things in association with Murder Inc. But Chris Gotti's brother, Irv Gotti, was actually one hell of a rap producer. We know him as the head of Murder Inc., like people would know Suge Knight from being the head of Death Row. But, did you know, for instance, Irv Gotti produced Jay-Z's Can I Live off Reasonable Doubt? That Irv Gotti produced a lot of Ja Rule's Veni Vidi Vici 1999 mainstream debut. Not only that, but Irv Gotti produced like most of Rule 336, that's Ja's second album, as well as Pain is Love, Ja's third album. Irv Gotti is no joke, and he was more than just an executive. This guy was a bona fide DJ and producer. He introduced a lot of people to each other, helped get Jay-Z on the map. There's a lot that Irv Gotti did that he's not getting full credit for. At some point, he needs to get in there and have his own verses. But Ja Rule started working with, DJ Irv Gotti, and as Irv Gotti started Murder Inc., Ja Rule was basically like the main artist. This is before Ashanti and others. But, I first started hearing Ja Rule pop up on like an early Mike Geronimo album. And, this was 1995. And think about this. Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt came out in 96. And on this song, on Mike Geronimo's debut album, The Natural, Ja Rule's featured on a track with Jay-Z and with DMX. DMX didn't debut with It's Dark and Hell is Hot until 98. So this is 3 years before that, and this is a year before Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt debut. They were all featured on Mike Geronimo's The Natural album. The song was called Time to Build. That's the first time I ever heard Ja. Then I heard Ja again on Mike Geronimo's second album. When's the last time you've even heard the name Mike Geronimo? Well, his first two albums featured Ja Rule, DMX, and Jay-Z, among others. But on his second album, Vendetta, now we're talking Mike Geronimo's 1997 album, had a song called Usual Suspects, and this one featured DMX before his debut, Ja Rule before his debut, Locks right around the time of their debut, and Tragedy Gaddafi. But this was a huge guest list, Usual Suspects. Listen to that one. DMX actually has the opening verse. But yeah, Ja Rule at the time just listed as Ja. This is before he even went by Ja Rule. It was just Ja for that first couple years. All featured on this album. So after that, we started hearing Ja pop up on, certain features. And then on the, I want to say the Rush Hour soundtrack, Jay-Z has a song, Can I Get a You, which was the album version of Can I Get a What, which, guess what? Ja Rule actually wrote that chorus. And if you listen to how Jay-Z spits it, can I get a what for all of my those? Can you just picture Ja Rule's voice? Can I get a you to all of my do? You no. You can hear Ja Rule saying that, right? Well, he wrote that chorus, and it ended up landing on Jay-Z's Hard Knock Life album as well. Huge feature for Ja Rule. This was 1998. So DMX, who Ja would often get compared to, dropped in 98 with his debut. Then Ja Rule came in 99 with his debut, Veni Vidi Vici, that did really well. His lead single from that album was Holla, holla, anybody that's willing to get dollars. And if you look at Ja in the videos, this guy's energy was just uncontrollable, as was his live show. I mean, this is one of the guys who's running back and forth on stage, never out of breath, never low energy. And, and he's got this voice where he's a little dude, but he's got this, type of voice that just carries, it resonates, and it's a deep voice. Method Man talks about, in his early Def Jam days, first meeting Ja Rule and him being just thrown back by how deep Ja Rule's voice was as this little kid. He's like, who the hell is this guy? Well, that lead single, Holla, Holla, actually hit number 35 on the US Hot 100. That's all genres, number 35, not bad for a debut. And that same song landed number 2 on the US rap charts. So Ja Rule was already on the map at that point. And then he had a feature with Drew Hill. Ja Rule ends up going more than platinum with that debut. To this day, I think it's 3 million worldwide on that debut album, Veni Vidi Vici. And if there were any criticisms of Ja at that time, it was that he was, basically doing what DMX was doing, something very similar within the same time period, basically. It seemed like DMX came out, then Ja Rule came out, basically with a similar voice, similar just off the walls energy, these dark references in their music, put it like this. Ja Rule's 4th album is called The Last Temptation. That sounds like a DMX style album title, but Ja Rule's intro to his debut album started off with Lord, can I get a break? Lord, can I get a break? I ain't really happy, yeah, I ain't really. Just the same kind, you get what I'm saying? DMX, Ja Rule parallels. So that was pretty much a criticism of Ja at the time, and also that he kind of wore the Tupac bandana, and this was just 3 years after Pac's passing. So, with the shirt, no shirt on, just kind of the skinny, wiry build, and just, being super energetic, aggressive approach to the microphone. So those were the Ja Rule criticisms at the time. But Ja Rule followed Veni Vidi Vici up with Rule 336. And this one, did double the sales of Veni Vidi Vici. This one, unlike Veni Vidi Vici, which hit number 3 as an album on the Billboard 200, Rule 336 hit number 1. And the lead single was Between Me and You, featuring Christina Milian, and the next single after that was Put It On Me, Where would I be without my baby? So when 50 Cent would later on start clowning Ja and just going all in, he was criticizing him for singing for basically having these R&B rap songs with sung vocals on the hook. And then 50 Cent kind of does a similar thing. If you look at the hottest songs that 50 Cent has had over the years, it was a melodic hook, right? But yeah, those two first and second singles off of Rule 336, Between Me and You and Put It On Me, hit number 11 and number 8 on the Hot 100. Again, cross genre. So now Ja Rule is just killing it. Even his fourth single from that album, I Cry, featuring Lil Mo, did really well. I mean, it wasn't as high ranking or high charting. It was number 40, but it got a lot of, radio play, video was playing, stuff like that. So Rule 336, slam dunk. He knocked that one out of the park. And again, his boy, Irv Gotti, his mentor and such, was producing most of those beats, along with Lil Rob was producing on a lot of those as well. Another solid, underrated producer. So by the third album, Pain is Love, Ja Rule's superstar status at this point is like in cruise control. This is another #1 album, Pain is Love. The lead single was Living It Up, which was a play off of Do I Do by Stevie Wonder. It was, to all my people that be living it up, do I do? But this was featuring Case. Remember Touch Me, Tease Me, featuring Foxy Brown from the Nutty Professor soundtrack? Yeah, the same Case was singing on Ja Rule's Living It Up single, which hit number 6. But that wasn't even the biggest single from that Pain is Love album. The next single, Always on Time, featuring Ashanti, in Ashanti's biggest breakthrough moment. This is before Ashanti was dropping albums. So by the time this dropped, I didn't know who Ashanti was. She wasn't really on the map like that. This song kind of put her out there, and then she dropped the Foolish single and so forth. But Always on Time hit #1. So this is Ja Rule's first #1 single. And around the same time, he's doing collabs, like where he's featured on songs that are hitting #1. 2 of those were with J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez. One of them was I'm Real, and the other one was Ain't It Funny. Both of those hit #1. Both of those were Ja Rule and Jennifer Lopez collabs. The second one, Ain't It Funny, also had a Cadillac tie on it. But Ja Rule, at this time, you could tell by the amount of #1s. He's got 2 that he featured on. One by himself is just killing it. Pain is Love, by the way, is probably my favorite Ja Rule album. Its third single was Down Ass Bitch, featuring Charlie Baltimore. That one hit number 21. Charlie Baltimore notoriously was the Notorious B.I.G.'s girlfriend, mistress, whatever you want to call it. Charlie Baltimore's featured on the Ja Rule song, Down A, B, another song that did really well. And, this album actually has a non-single, but it's a song that was a kind of a redo, or it rejuvenated a Tupac verse from a Pac song called Pain, but this one's called So Much Pain. And this would be the reason why Eminem, after 50 Cent, Eminem jumped in and it became a Murder Inc. versus Shady Records aftermath type of thing. But Eminem jumped in and got on Ja Rule for thinking he was Pac and for basically playing himself like he was Pac-like. But Ja Rule has a song called So Much Pain that revives Tupac's voice. And man, when I heard that song in, I think, 2001, I was blown away. Like, first of all, don't sleep on Ja Rule's verse 1 and verse 2 from that. He's coming all in. They'll never take me alive. I'm getting high with my 4-5. And then the chorus, like, it's a sung vocal, tired of the strain and the pain. And then they'll never take me alive. Like, Pac's voice comes in, like, towards the end of the song. And then Pac's verse comes in, and it's just haunting, man. So Much Pain by Ja Rule featuring Tupac from Pain is Love. That might be my favorite song on the album, even though Dial M for Murder, I think that's track 2 on the album. Such a sick beat. It's just menacing, and Ja Rule just comes in and kills it. Dial M for Murder. I think that's the name of an old Hitchcock or Kubrick. I think it's Hitchcock movie. But yeah, Dial M for Murder. Sick track 2. I love this album. So that's Ja Rule's third. And then it's around this time that the things are heating up between 50 Cent and Ja Rule. 50 Cent, made the song Wanksta. Before that, he made Your Life's on the Line. Murder, I don't believe you, murder. fuck around and leave you. Sick 50 Cent song. I love that Power of the Dollar album, by the way. This is before Get Rich or Die Trying. 50 Cent was knocking on the door. He was signed to Columbia Records, released a dope album in like 99, 2000, ended up getting shelved after he got shot and stabbed and was deemed basically too controversial, started getting blackballed, and Eminem discovering his mixtape basically turned 50 Cent's fortunes around. Even though 50 Cent was doing a ton of work with these mixtapes, it kind of feels inevitable that he was going to get another look at the mainstream industry. But yeah, the fact that it was Eminem that took him in, the rest is history, right? But yeah, so things are starting to escalate where a lot of rap fans by this point are picking sides. And because 50 Cent has so much juice, so much momentum, so much backing coming into the rap game like an avalanche, Ja Rule just couldn't get enough public support, and plus you couple that with the investigations, along with the fact that, yeah, the Source magazine, the longtime flagship hip hop magazine for years, you know, through the early 90s, through the mid 90s, into the late 90s, turn of the century. Well, the Source, Benzino and Eminem had a big time riff. So the Source was anti-Eminem, Eminem was anti-the Source. Double XL, though, was emerging, and Double XL doubled down on their 50 Cent Shady Aftermath support, where it almost seemed like Shady Aftermath had stake in Double XL. So everybody's kind of picking a side, and Ja Rule, The Source, they're all just taking L's, whereas Shady Aftermath, the wind is at their back by this point. So again, couple that with the investigations, with, you know, just things kind of crumbling for Murder Inc., financially and so forth, and you know they're auditing their books, all kinds of mess. And you know Def Jam, who Murder Inc. was a subsidiary under, like, you know, Rockefeller Records, Def Jam basically kicked Murder Inc. out of their office spaces while the investigation was taking place. So Irv Gotti and company were just scrambling and just trying to hold things together, and it ended up just being unsustainable to where, yes, Ja Rule did drop The Last Temptation, and it did do pretty well commercially, because although 50 Cent had dropped like Wanksta and, you know, other songs targeted at Ja Rule, 50 Cent's album with like Back Down didn't drop until 2003. That's when Get Rich or Die Trying dropped, early 2003. Last Temptation dropped in 2002, so Ja Rule wasn't totally bodied at this point. He was in the thick of it in terms of the beef with Shady Aftermath, but he wasn't done for yet. So The Last Temptation is kind of, you know, the last relevant Ja Rule album while he is, you know, kind of still on top of the game. But remember, you know, all the chart positions of those earlier songs, like Always on Time reaching #1, Put It On Me with Lil Mo and Vita reaching #8. Well, the lead single from The Last Temptation, Rule's fourth album, was Thug Lovin', featuring Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown was kind of making a comeback a little bit at this time. And this song only hit #42, but the next single, Mesmerize, again featuring Ashanti, hit #2. So this one actually did really well. But by this time, Ja Rule's, you know, career was kind of descending. Murder Inc. kind of fell apart, and so he dropped a kind of a mixtape called Blood in My Eye. It didn't have a lot of support, but it did have a cool song called Clap Back that did okay. It did pretty well. Cool song. But, you know, the writing was on the wall. And this was late 2003. Blood in My Eye didn't sell well at all and didn't have like a lot of fanfare. And then he dropped one more album called RULE in 2004. It had a pretty successful single called Wonderful. It hit #5 on the charts with R. Kelly and Ashanti. But that would be the last album that Ja Rule would drop for the next 8 years. Like he had a pretty good mixtape in 2009 called Mirror or The Mirror, but RULE dropped in 2004, and his next album, Pain Is Love, dropped in 2012. 8 years later, it was game over by that point. Ja Rule was sentenced to like 2 to 3 years and served like, I think, a total of about 3 years in prison. So, you know, everything just kind of unraveled. Murder Inc. was just done for. And Rule's career still hasn't really reemerged. But because the descent of Ja Rule and Murder Inc. happened at the same time as the beef with 50 Cent, the narrative has been 50 Cent killed Ja Rule's career. While that's only partially true, the feds and investigations and litigation killed Ja Rule's career. And then you throw in things like the recent Fire Festival, which they've done a documentary on how big of a disaster that was. And Ja Rule was a partner in that festival turned disaster. Like, Ja Rule has become a punchline in the rap game unfairly, if you ask me, especially because when you take, his run from 1998 to say 2004, you're talking more than a half decade of relevance, where really when you stack it up against 50 Cent. If 50 Cent really started breaking in 2000, 2001, and then, 2 years later, Get Rich or Die Trying, 2003, 2005 was The Massacre, and then Curtis, that's the one where he had the face-off with Kanye West, and they dropped on the same day, Curtis and Kanye's third album, Graduation. Kanye West won that battle. He outsold 50 Cent and so forth. Well, Curtis dropped in 2007, about 4.5 years after Get Rich or Die Trying, and Curtis was really the last time 50 Cent was super relevant musically. Yes, he dropped, Before I Self-Destruct, that did okay, but nah, it was really Curtis was kind of 50 Cent's top of the game swan song. So it's not like 50 Cent had a lot more longevity at the top than Ja Rule. Ja Rule, if anything, I think had a little bit more longevity. Yet the way the story is told was that Ja Rule was some like a flash in the pan that just crashed and burned. Now, the crash and burn is true, but the flash in the pan, nah, it was like a pretty long 5-6 year run that Ja Rule had. And I think that through this Versus opportunity is going to be acknowledged and honored and respected in the way that the Versus platform is meant to do for a lot of these legends. So I just hope that there's a PR turnaround in the perception of Ja Rule and his career. I really think that he needs to be appreciated a lot more than he is, and he has been. Like, how many of y'all have really been riding for Ja over the past 10 years when you hear his name kind of kicked around as a punchline? It's almost like he went from being, and maybe this is because he wasn't like he didn't maintain his like street cred as he was doing all these R&B crossover like hits. Maybe that's why he didn't have a ton of like cultural support when shit really hit the fan for him. But, regardless of what the reason is, like, the public was very fickle when 50 Cent and Shady Aftermath and company and everybody jumped on Ja Rule, who, by the way, that one song, I'm from New York, that Jadakiss did in his verses when the Lox took on Dipset, and that was one of the best moments of that verses when Jada came in and did his verse to New York. New York was on that Ja Rule RULE album, and it featured Jadakiss and Fat Joe. So it's going to be interesting. They're probably going to do that collaboratively, I think, in this versus battle. So Ja Rule's going to have a ton of fire to present to this versus battle. Now, Fat Joe's got a ton of features that he's on, and he's got some hot songs of his own. Has managed to stay relevant with hits every couple years. But, I mean, Ja Rule's discography, I think if you were to match their upper bound, like the best of versus the best of, it's a no contest. I think Ja Rule runs away with that one. And I just really hope that this versus battle does what it's intended to do, because, again, Ja Rule's kind of caught a raw deal. And I think he's been well-intentioned. So, yeah, let's see how this one plays out. But, yeah, respect Ja Rule's catalog. Go back and listen to those 4 albums. Veni Vidi Vici, Rule 336, Pain is Love, and The Last Temptation. And, RULE, the 5th album. But, yeah, let me know what you think about the versus battle and of Ja Rule's reputation. Is it fair? Unfair? Did 50 Cent body his career, or was it really kind of a mixing of 50 Cent and all the momentum that they had coming from Shady Aftermath and the federal investigation and the tax problems? Ja Rule went to jail for like gun possession and drugs or something like that, but it was like the tax issue that kept him in for longer, I believe, than he was supposed to be in there. So yeah, it really became a hot mess, but I feel like this versus battle will be an opportunity at redemption. But please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love hip hop like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.